Everyone. I am Melanie McDermott. I'm the Director of Marketing at Storyshares, and I'm so excited to welcome you to our very first Lift webinar, where we're going to learn about all things literacy intervention for teens and preteens. Um, we are so excited. Shira Engel, who is our Director of Education, is going to be leading the webinar this evening. We ask that if you have questions, put them in the chat, and we will have time for a little Q&A at the end of the session. I think that's it. Take it away, Shira.
Great. Okay, thank you for being here. And if you are watching this asynchronously, I'm just going to throw out a little pitch to send questions. There will be a lot of contact information at the end. There will be a link to an FAQ page, but definitely send those questions at the end. I am so happy to be here with all of you today. If you see me look to the left, I have the presentation pulled up on another screen, but I'm still totally present and with you all. I would love to hear a little bit about who's joining us live. So if you could let us know where you're zooming in from and what your favorite teaching tool is. If you could just let us know in the chat, that would be great. And I will do the same. There will be a couple of chat moments throughout the webinar. And note to self, I should have thought of my answer to this question before posing it. Oh, nice. That virtual letter soundboard is really, really awesome. Magnetiles, that's an awesome teaching tool. Smartboard. I was on the cusp of saying smartboard as well. Okay, thank you everyone for contributing. We have people from all over the country here, which is super exciting. And I am going to do a quick introduction, and then we'll get into the content for today. So I'm Shira Engel, as Melanie mentioned. I am the Director of Education at Storyshares. Before I came to Storyshares, I taught middle school humanities and was also a middle school reading interventionist. I had the experience fresh out of graduate school. I have my master's in secondary English education. I learned how to teach a really good literary analysis essay. I could teach students how to read and analyze and debate texts that were written at or above grade level, but I did not know how to teach a student how to read. And my first year of teaching sixth grade, I had several students in my classroom who could not decode single syllable words. And I was at a total loss. I had no idea what to do. And so I ended up pursuing my dyslexia specialist certification. And that, in so many ways, changed the game for me. It was a really intense process, these processes, and I know that there are some people on the Zoom today who have been through it. They are mastery based, which is this lift is also mastery based, and we'll talk about what that means. But a student had to master the skills in order to move on. So it took a really long time, and it was an extremely meaningful experience. Um, and then I came back and I had all of these amazing teaching tools. I had letter soundboards. I had word cards. I had great ways to use a multisensory approach to teach my students how to read. What I lacked were texts that met them where they were at as sixth graders and then as seventh graders and eighth graders. I didn't have texts that really spoke to their lived experiences as older students who were learning how to read and learning foundational skills. So I came to Storyshares through that experience in an interesting way. And there's a blog post that Melanie can share that kind of goes into that and how that connects to the work that we're doing at Lyft. So that is, a little bit from where I'm coming from. I would love to know about where you all are coming from in terms of the subjects and age groups that you currently teach or that you taught recently. So if everyone could just add that in the chat. Thank you. Okay, we have a K through 12 reading specialist, a Wilson Reading Systems practitioner. An elementary teacher turned high school academic interventionist. That's really what we're talking about with pairing those skills, those foundational skills with content for older students. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Melissa, grade 7 through 12 reading specialist. Thank you, Mary, although possibly Jamie. ELA, social science, awesome. And special education, 6 through 8 literacy specialist. Thank you. So that is, and we're going to go into this a lot very soon, but older students really know when things were not created with them in mind. And so LIFT is created with those students that you teach or that you recently taught in mind first, and everything else is built around them. Um, so I would love to know, we're gonna take a pause on the chat after this, but thank you all so much for your participation. I would love to know what your favorite part of literacy instruction is and what you find challenging about literacy instruction. I know those are really loaded questions. So what we're gonna do is we are going to do a teaching tool that I remember from my talk during, the pandemic, like I think many people here did. And this is a tool called Waterfall. So if everyone could just type their answer in the chat, but don't press enter. Um, this is, I don't know if, yeah, Portia also did this and reminded me that I love this tool so much. Portia, someone else from our team who's on the Zoom, our chief product officer, and who also taught during COVID. And so for Waterfall, you're going to type your answer into the chat. I'm going to give everyone about a minute of reflecting time to write out what your favorite part of literacy instruction is and what you find challenging. If you're like a minute is too short, but don't press enter. Don't press enter yet, although some people are so on it and already pressed enter. So just write it out and I will let you know when to press enter and we're going to get everyone's responses at once. So the minute begins now. I'll see if I can be fancy and do a timer. I won't be fancy, but I'll let you know when we have 30 seconds left. Thirty seconds left. Okay. We're going to stop in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right. When I say go, everyone's going to press enter. Go. Awesome. When it clicks, and then the challenge is differentiation for a huge spectrum of skills and abilities. That makes total sense. Okay, so I'm noticing that a lot of people are saying that their favorite thing about literacy instruction for older students is seeing progress and seeing those click moments. And there are so many ways in which that's easier to do with foundational skill instruction and many ways in which that's way harder. So that makes total sense. And we're going to get into how that plays into LIFT as well. Getting older students to buy in, the social emotional aspect. Portia wrote about implementation, which is also something that we are talk about constantly at Storyshares. That is often where programs flourish or where they get diminished. So we will discuss how implementation works with the program as well. Yeah, and what Mari shared about the trauma that can come with being in a school system and being constantly labeled as a non-reader or feeling like you cannot participate in any of your education because of literacy skill development. That is a huge, huge thing for older striving readers. There is an identity that has already been built. Um, as there's a reader identity. We have reader identities that are wildly positive, and then we can also have reader identities that are very negative. And so, really working on that buy-in piece and supporting students with a growth mindset and showing them how those identities can shift. Those are all really unique pieces of supporting older striving readers. So today we're going to go through the kind of nitty-gritty of what is lift, why lift, which I don't think we have a single reason on here that you all haven't already labeled in the waterfall. So really looking at why we need something that is unique for older students, that is not just something that was created for younger students that we are superimposing on an older population, but why we need something that's created with them in mind. We're going to talk about what lift includes. You're going to see examples of lesson plans. You're going to see examples of materials. We're going to talk to you about timeline, all the logistics, how you implement it. We'll have time for an FAQ and Q&A. We are working on anticipating as many questions as possible, and we would be so grateful if you shared questions that we did not anticipate as well. So we'll make time for that, and then we will talk through some next steps. Okay, so LIFT it stands for Literacy Intervention for Teens. Huge disclaimer that a lot of middle school students start out not exactly as teenagers. So LIFT is for teens and preteens. It is beginning in grade 6 and really created with those students in mind. So created with middle and high school students in mind. And we differentiate for middle and high school as well. There's a lot of differentiation within the program. So we have a decoding track and we have a fluency track, and we'll talk about what that looks like. We designed it because we really wanted to embed decoding support in ways that were appropriate and relevant for older students. So combining morphology and looking at Latin roots, bases, prefixes, suffixes, all of that, but also looking at multisyllabic decoding earlier than you might look at multisyllabic decoding in an intervention program or in a literacy program that's made for kindergarten through second grade, for example. And then LIFT is centered on truly engaging texts. So we base this on a whole host of research, and we're happy to share where these evidence-based practices come from. We can share our works cited to LIFT as well. But there is a growing evidence base for literacy support for older students. At Storyshares, we have always based our teacher materials on the Institute for Education Sciences guidelines for reading intervention for grades 4 through 9. Those have since expanded to 6 through 12. And then we also have Institute for Education Sciences guidelines for newcomers and for adolescent newcomers and multilingual learners. And we use that as one of our starting points, and we paired those guidelines with really engaging texts. So that's the research that was done before we created anything for LIFT. There is also a growing research base that we have been developing in partnership with Hill for Literacy, and we'll talk through those offerings as well. For Springfield Public Schools in Massachusetts, we have partnered for the past 2 years with a foundation called Hope for Youth and Families to pilot LIFT. And so LIFT has been piloted as a very intensive summer program. It's 4 weeks for 5 hours a day. LIFT has also been piloted as a school year intervention. So this year they just concluded the school year intervention of all the lesson plans and that you will see as part of this program. We'll talk about this as well, but the assessment system is something that we will likely build out later on, but we are also very cognizant that older students who struggle with reading tend to be overassessed, which can have many negative implications for their academic careers. So in an effort to not overassess, what we do on our end and what we did through this pilot, which ended up being very successful, is we align lift and we align placement and progress monitoring with existing interventions that the school or district is using. So this district used the NWEA MAP assessment, and that's how we measured the efficacy of lift. We also included DIBELS as a secondary screener. We'll talk about this later, but for schools that do not have the appropriate assessments that would lead to placement in a decoding track or into a fluency track, we do have some that we can recommend as part of this and as part of implementation. So this is a little bit on why lift. I don't think there's anything in here that you all haven't said or that you all haven't felt, but we have seen the need for lift for a very long time, for longer than I anticipated we would. And I will be like completely candid. Storyshares began and Storyshares is a publisher of high interest texts for older striving readers. And we created our first decodable series when I first came on board with Storyshares in 2023. That decodable series works as a supplement to existing intervention programs. And I thought that there were amazing intervention programs out there. It should stay a supplement. And then we started getting so many requests for intervention programs that aligned perfectly with those decodable books and that really centered connected text practice in ways that existing programs do not always. So we have been keeping track of all the need that we have noticed through emails, through Facebook posts, through Reddit threads, and that's what you're seeing here. So I would love for you all to just share and we'll do it in the same waterfall style, what you all want in a literacy intervention program for teens and preteens. This can be something that you have in your existing program. If you have an existing program and you're like, I just want it to look like it's for teens and preteens, or it can be something that you don't think a program has ever thought of yet. So I'm going to give us, again, 1 minute to waterfall these responses, and I will let you know when to press enter. I'm starting the timer now. You have about 20 seconds left, 25 seconds. Okay, please press enter in 5, in 4, in 3, in 2, and in 1. Okay. So I see engaging text that allows students to practice the current skill, high interest materials that look like they are for older students and not primary, grown and growing up books and activities, frequent celebration points. That celebration piece is so huge to build up the confidence of older striving readers and to support them in the social emotional aspect of learning to read and developing their literacy skills. Feel relevant and timely for students and respectful of who they are as older learners. Materials that are representative of teenagers and their diverse lived experiences, books that are unputdownable. I love that. And high interest topics that work with multisyllabic words and high level vocabulary. Great. We talk about this a lot at Storyshares. Our decodable books are a very different spin on a decodable book. We include a lot of higher level vocabulary because a lot of higher level vocabulary is decodable. And so our challenge words don't mean vocabulary words. Challenge words are words that don't always follow a scope and sequence or that are not phonetic. But you can have the word vex is a wonderful vocabulary word. It is a consonant vowel consonant word. It is very easily decodable. And with Lift, we really want to connect students back to the standards that they are learning in their core classes. And so we're supporting them with building background knowledge and a robust vocabulary as they learn to decode as well. So these are really great. Okay, so if you have any questions at this point and you just don't want to forget the question, please put it in the chat, and Melanie will catalog it for later. I know for me, I like cannot, I need to write things down in order to retain them. So if you're similar, then go for it and we will get to it. So there are several components to Lift. We start with engaging books. We have a very robust teacher manual that includes instructional routines and then the lesson plans that pair with all of those instructional routines for both fluency and decoding. We have student workbooks. We have also letter sound cards, vocabulary cards, manipulatives in that way. And then we have teacher training and implementation support that goes along with it as well. So we believe in beginning with engaging books, high interest, engaging books written for older students with them in mind. Our decodable chapter books are written and our high-low books that pair with the fluency lessons. These are all written by a very diverse array of authors. Some of these authors had the experience as teenagers of being newcomers and multilingual learners themselves. Some of these authors had the experience of learning to read at an older age. Some of our authors have the experience of being teachers of older students, and some of our authors are high school students. So we really we crowdsource our content to make sure that we are providing students with diverse representation of many different experiences while they are learning those foundational skills. So we begin with the books. So every Lift kit comes with 6 sets of an 8-book decodable chapter book series. We do 6 is the recommended size for an intervention group for Lift. If you have fewer than 6 students, that is fine. If you have more than 6 students, we're collecting data on the efficacy of that. We have some data from the past year where a teacher did Lift with 12 students and it was very successful. So we're constantly evolving this program, and this is definitely something that we are happy to work with you on, and that we're able to get materials on kind of an as needed basis for that too. So we have 6 sets of the decodable chapter book series called These First Letters, and then we have 6 sets of 4 high-low books. The high-low books are for the fluency lessons, and the decodable chapter books are for the decoding lessons. Both of these types of lessons include vocabulary and comprehension and written response to reading, which we will get into in a moment. So these first letters, and I know that there are a lot of people here who already have these first letters in their classroom. It is a really special series about teens from all over the world who are collaborating on improving their community in some way. And it begins with Max's story. And Max is a student who really, really has struggled with reading, and he's really struggled in school, and he just wants to play basketball, and he can't unless he gets some extra credit in one of his classes. And in order to get extra credit, he joins a pen pal program, and that is how he meets all the other characters in all the other books. These are fiction texts with heavy informational text elements. Every single book includes multiple genres. We have graphic novel elements in our decodable books. We have epistolary letter elements in the books. We have articles and field notes for one of the characters who's studying manatees. There's really a range of knowledge building content that's built in already to these very engaging fiction texts. Same with the high-low books for fluency. These have fewer text features in large part because we build in the text features when we create the fluency passages. So I will show you what that looks like soon. There are also teacher materials. So there's an educator manual that includes all the lesson plans, a full implementation guide, how to get started, ideas for supporting students with the social emotional aspect, scaffolds, all sorts of things. We also have letter sound cards for every single syllable type and every single letter. And this is a really important part of the program. It is something that we have been asked for so many times. Letter sound cards are great ways to teach students the phonemes that they are reading. A quick Google search of letter sound cards will bring up letter sound cards that will be very appealing for a kindergarten student and not necessarily appealing for an older student. So we made sure to include pictures of teenagers on every single letter sound card where appropriate, and subjects that would engage them where a picture of a person wouldn't make sense. Same with the keywords. We really curated the keywords so that they were newcomer and multilingual learner appropriate, so that they were, mostly that tier one and tier two vocabulary, and that they paired with images. And then same thing with our vocabulary cards. They go into part of speech. They pair with the passages that students are reading in the different chapters in the book. And we also include synonyms. And then for student material, students get a decoding workbook and they get a fluency workbook, depending on where they place into the program. I will use this as a moment to just share a note about placement. The decoding lessons seamlessly flow into the fluency lessons, but if a student does not need decoding support, because their assessment data shows that they do not need decoding support, they could be placed immediately in the fluency track and still have enough lessons for a full school year. The decoding track begins at closed syllables. So it is really starting at those very foundational skills with an earlier introduction to multisyllabic decoding. So students get a decoding student workbook, a fluency student workbook, which includes all the passages, a dry erase board, because for many reasons, part of that is engagement. I don't know a single teenage student who does not love writing on a dry erase board. I would return to my classroom with like a full dry erase board covered by all sorts of notes from students. But also because keeping a huge part of keeping older students engaged and having them transfer what they're learning throughout their brain involves them engaging with the lesson in a really tactile way as the lesson progresses. So there are opportunities for dry erase board instruction in the lesson where students are working out the encoding piece, the spelling piece, as a way to support their literacy as well. And then we also include a lot of extensions in Lift because we know that I think it was Melanie who mentioned the differentiation piece. And we really want to support students in growing their skills in a variety of ways, including in their core instruction. And so we have a lot of extensions that teachers can use and that students can use to connect what they're learning in their intervention to what they're learning in their core classes. And one of them is through a literature circle routine and book club roll cards. That is loosely based on reciprocal teaching, which is a really incredible strategy for supporting older students with taking ownership of the comprehension process when they read. And so these are very adolescent specific book club roll cards as well. They are not necessarily in the lessons themselves, but they're used as extensions. And then these programs are often only as successful as the implementation. So we at Storyshares offer an initial implementation session that comes with Lift, that comes with the whole package. We go through everyone's unique school environment with the stakeholders of the program. There are huge programmatic challenges, which actually no one brought up, but including myself, that was a huge challenge for me when implementing literacy intervention for older striving readers. There was not time in the school day for it. And so I did not know how to fit it into my classes, and I didn't know how to fit it in when I was supposed to teach humanities and prepare students for the state test. And so we are really focusing in on how does this fit into the structures already in place at schools. And if it does not, we're not going to try to force something. If it does not fit in, we are going to talk about the most, and this will be the first of many lift puns that you will hear. We will talk about the most low lift ways to integrate lift into the school setting. So that could be through a win or a what I need period. It could be through tier 2 instruction and small group instruction in a larger class. We have a lot of possibilities for that. Um, and then we are also including assessment integration because in this phase, we do not have assessments that come with Lyft. So we would really love to be able to integrate what schools are already using. And if schools do not have something that they are using, we will support you in finding something that works. Um, and then this is an optional add-on that is highly recommended. It does not come with the program, but it pairs with it. We piloted Lyft with Hill for Literacy, which is a phenomenal professional learning organization that really focuses on teaching teachers how to teach foundational literacy skills in ways that make sense for those student populations. And Hill for Literacy recreated one of their most popular courses, which is on small group instructional routines. And they recreated it so that it is specifically for teaching adolescents. So they're pairing it with the science of reading research that is specific to teaching teens to read. This series goes through all of the evidence-based instructional routines that are included in Lyft. All of our routines that we use in Lyft are evidence-based routines that Hill has created out of an abundance of the latest research on the science of reading as it applies to adolescents. So we do really recommend that piece as well. But if that is not possible for whatever reason, all of the routines are in the educator manual in really clear teacher-friendly and student-friendly language as well. Okay, so I'll pause here for a moment in case anyone really wants to ask a question in the chat before they forget, because I know that was a lot of information. And then I'm going to go into one decoding lesson and one fluency lesson so that you can see the full, the breadth of what Lyft offers. Okay, feel free to keep using the chat, but I'm going to continue just for the sake of time. I know that for East Coasters, it's late. And for West Coasters, you probably had a full school day just now. So that's a lot. So all the lesson plans are in the educator manual. This is the first decoding lesson. It begins with short vowel sounds for A, E, and I. Every lesson begins with an irregular word introduction. All of these steps to the lesson, it says Hill step, that's for Hill for Literacy. They pair with a routine card. A routine card has a script that teachers can use or because there is a wide range of, some people prefer a script, some people don't, a script that teachers can use or teaching ideas for how to introduce the skill. And those routine cards are in the educator manual. So it begins with an irregular word introduction, irregular word practice, and then it really goes to the subword level. So looking at phoneme instruction, that is where we would use the letter sound cards for irregular word practice. And then later for regular word practice, after students have learned the different word parts, there are grids, and those grids are used to support students in practicing the words and practicing the blending routines without to make this as low prep, as low lift as possible for the teachers implementing it. So the grids are included in a way where you could flip to the page in the educator manual and the grid is large enough for the class of students to see it. And it is also in it's also in the student workbook so that they can have their own copy of it as well. And then there's a word blending routine. There is a routine both for sound focus blending for single syllable words and a routine for multisyllabic blending. And we use both wherever possible because for older students, as the IES tells us, we really want to up that focus on multisyllabic decoding early on to show how all of these fit together. And one of the reasons why we do this, which I think can sometimes, I think sometimes this is the center of it all. And sometimes for me as an interventionist, sometimes I would get so excited when students would decode a multisyllabic word that I would forget that the whole point is for them to read a book. And so all of this is backwards planned from part 6 of the lesson, which is the text reading practice, where they are engaging with a full decodable text. They are opening an actual book that looks like a book for middle and high school students, and they are reading the text independently. All of these routines support that. And they support that independence. So that is one thing that we are prioritizing in Lift is that this is the center of everything. This book is the center of everything that they're doing there. Um, and then there's encoding and spelling practice. And then there are lots of extension activities, something that often, which we really tried to change with Lift, something that is often missing from some literacy intervention programs is we get so focused on teaching students how to decode. We get so focused on teaching them how to read. And then there's that writing piece that is so key. And sometimes there's just not enough time for it and we don't do it. But I have yet to meet a striving reader who does not also need support with foundational writing skills. So we embed that in scaffolded ways throughout the student workbook as extensions. Also because older students tend to finish things at different times. And we want them to stay engaged. And in order to keep them engaged, we want to give them things that they can keep doing to further their learning. So those extensions are also included here. Same with vocabulary cards and the letter sound cards that are appropriate for the lesson. So that was a decoding lesson for students who place into beginning decoding. And then we have a fluency lesson. And for the fluency routine, students are building background knowledge. They're getting a lot of vocabulary instruction. They also have these vocabulary cards. They are doing phrase cued text reading. So they're practicing prosody. They're practicing reading with expression throughout the lesson. Then they set a purpose for reading. And then they have that part 6 is the same. It's connected text reading. They're doing a first read, a second read, and an optional third read. Some older students will reject the third read entirely. Some older students need the third read to feel successful. So this is part of that, you know your students best kind of thing. And the whole lesson is backwards planned from this. This does not show the query or written response to reading that comes at the end of that lesson for space purposes, but there is a written response to reading portion for every fluency lesson. There is a fluency passage. Students are tracking their words per minute and they are tracking their accuracy. And they are taught about fluency through having a fluency checklist, that fluency is accuracy, rate, expression, and using punctuation to support that reading with expression. Doing one of those things in isolation is not fluency. So there are a bunch of checks embedded for that because often the research says, and a lot of practice has shown that older students get very focused on rate, in large part because of that social emotional aspect. They want to show that they can read quickly, and accuracy can often be sacrificed at its expense. So we are really embedding different purposes for reading and we vary them. So sometimes the purpose for reading will be reading rate. Sometimes it will be prosody and reading with expression. Sometimes the purpose for reading will be even more granular about paying attention to punctuation. Sometimes it will be about multisyllabic decoding and making sure that students are really accurate with their decoding as they read. And that's varied throughout all the lessons in Lift. And then all the fluency passages come from a very high interest book. Like we have, over 500 high interest, more foundational level books at Storyshares, and we chose the 4 most high interest ones for this program. So that is one of them. And okay, great. So that's a great question, which we will definitely get to. Okay, so there are some resource links that Melanie is going to put into the chat. Oh, those are next steps. Let me first, can you maybe first do the Q&A before next steps? I think that might make more sense because I think some people. Okay, so I see one question in the chat for how long is a complete lesson? So these are routines that have been used across many schools and they are designed for a minimum 30-minute lesson. They can all be done. A full lesson can take 30 minutes. Um, we recommend that at the beginning, 45 minutes are allotted whenever possible for those lessons to just support both the students and the teachers in getting the routines down. The lesson routines, these different parts, once they're down, they're very quick because we're working with teenagers. We want to keep them engaged, and it's a really perky pace. But there is a learning curve for both the adult and the student. So we anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes. The extension activities are there so that if, for example, you have an hour-long block for reading intervention, first of all, that's awesome. But if that's the case for your school, then you will have plenty to work with in that hour. You won't need to do any additional prep. Like there are extension activities for every lesson that will support that work. And the extensions are there because we know that not everyone has an hour-long intervention block. So that's why that's there. And we recommend 2 to 3 times a week. We've gotten great efficacy data with both types of frequency. We have not done once a week. We don't believe that would be effective. Any other questions? And you're welcome to put them in the chat, or if you are more comfortable unmuting and asking the question, that works too. I'm just going to grab my charger. And I'll give about a minute for anyone to gather questions or ask questions. And there are timestamps in the lesson plans themselves. I should also share that. And if folks don't have questions now, I can go through some of the most frequently asked questions from our FAQ. So I will just go ahead and pull that up just so we can anticipate any further questions. So we talked through the different materials that are included in the program. Oh, perfect. How many total lessons? So we have 35 decoding lessons, and the decoding lessons flow right into the fluency lessons, and we have 60 fluency lessons. We do recommend homogeneous small groups in terms of so that students are working on similar things, which is fairly standard practice for literacy intervention. It also helps with the social emotional piece. If students are working on slightly different skills, but are still all working on decoding, we would still recommend that everyone start off with book one because our decodables do include more multisyllabic word instruction than a typical decodable. So there are more challenge words in there for students who don't need as much support. Is it advisable to teach this outside the classroom setting? That is a great question. We piloted this program initially in a summer literacy program. So there were classrooms in that summer literacy program, but it was taught by, and I should say this, like if a lot of teachers of older students, if you are anything like me, when I did my teacher education program, I was not taught how to teach someone how to read. I would be able to use the professional learning that is part of Lift and the resources that I am being given through Lift to successfully implement this intervention. It is not created with a requirement for a lot of pre-existing literacy training. However, if there isn't that pre-existing literacy training, that pre-existed existing literacy training, we highly recommend really pursuing the professional learning pieces ahead of time. If the question about outside the classroom setting refers to in tutoring groups, yes, Lift works wonderfully for tutoring groups. It works wonderfully for one-on-one tutoring. We have piloted it with that. And we also have piloted it within an after-school program. So outside the daytime classroom setting, and that has been wildly successful. That is actually the NWEA map data that you all saw earlier, where students showed tremendous growth after 6 months of Lift. It is meant to be done. That's a very interesting question. It can be done one-on-one. It definitely can be done one-on-one with the teacher playing a more active role in the discussion part of the lesson. Students receive a query for reading, and that query in the connected text practice. So really all parts of the lesson can be done one-on-one until that query. That query is where students are discussing some kind of comprehension piece that connects back to a grade level standard. So in that, we encourage debate, we encourage a lot of discourse amongst the students, and some building of rapport. And that can be done. That's best if it's done small group, fine. If it's done one-on-one, just know that, like, as the educator in that situation, you will be taking on more of a peer role at that part of the lesson. Those are great questions. And Julie, does that answer your questions? I know the tutoring piece can be slightly nuanced there, but it does work for that. It is designed initially as a tier 2 intervention for small group instruction, though. Okay, great. Okay, so for fitting Lift into a schedule, it works well for an intervention period, for small group instruction, a win period, a what I need period, or during after school or summer programming. Um, and for and then we talk through the number of lessons that are included, and we will talk through some next steps and where you can learn more. But if you have any other questions as we go through the next step slide, please ask those questions in the chat and we will get to them. We have a little bit of time. And you are also completely welcome to reach out to me with any questions that you have about the program. And then, just because we have these people on here too, the last thing I will say about this program, which I just really believe in so many ways, is it was created by people who are either still in the classroom as interventionists or have very recently been in the classroom as interventionists. And so we are really using that proximity of experience to create something that is specifically not only for older students. We want it to be, older students are so good at knowing when something was not created with them in mind. So we are creating this with them in mind first and foremost, but we are also creating it for those teachers of older students. So the language in the teacher materials does really reflect that very unique experience of teaching students who have passed all those quote unquote thresholds for literacy instruction, and still need that support. So for next steps, Melanie, would you like to do this part? I'm also happy to.
Sure. Yeah, excited. Thank you for this amazing presentation. I know all these things about Lyft, and it's still exciting to hear about it. So we are offering an exclusive webinar discount to anyone who has attended the webinar, or maybe you're watching it asynchronously later. But you can get 20% off of Lyft only until June 13th, though, which is next Friday. So take action on that. You can reach out to sales@storyshares.org for a purchase request, or if you want some more information, and you can just mention that you attended the webinar, registered for the webinar for that discount. And then we are always sending out new information about Lyft. We've been sending out some free samples, free resources that are part of the Lyft program that we thought you might love. So if you're not already on our newsletter mailing list, please join it. And I'm going to put that link in the chat because I realized that's not there. Yeah, that's it for next steps.
Great. Okay. So that is all I have for everyone this evening. If there are any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We would love to hear from you. And this is also everything we do at StoryShares and everything we do in teaching in general is very iterative. So we would love to build more with your requests and needs in mind, whether that's specific books, interests that your students have, or specific kinds of instructional routines that you would like to see. Um, so thank you so much for joining us tonight. And oh, I see something in the chat. There's a newsletter sign up. Perfect.
Thank you everyone for being here. And if you have any other questions or something comes up, email Shira or me or sales or anyone, and we are here to help.
Yeah. Okay. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a great night.